Hello, I'm Gita Wadaway, and this is Slightly Suspect, where we take a look at the completely legal but definitely shady side of American politics. So today I have a puzzle for you. What do these 6 people have in common that makes them all qualified to be a U.S. ambassador? A luxury handbag designer from Palm Beach, the owner of the New York Jets NFL football team, the wife of a Kentucky coal baron, a dermatologist from Nevada, a record industry executive from Los Angeles, and a lawyer from Queens. You probably can guess that the common thread is it's money, a lot of money, or at least the ability to raise it. Ambassadors are the top representatives of the United States in the foreign country to which they're assigned. So they literally speak for the president, and they have a lot of power and authority to negotiate deals, to resolve disputes. They also manage all the consular services of the embassy, including, issuing visas and passports and offering emergency services to U.S. citizens who are either traveling or living abroad in that country. So it's a really, really, really important role. And you might wonder how having a lot of money would qualify you for such a role. And the answer to that question lies in just exactly how ambassadors are selected in the United States. And the short answer to that question is the president chooses them, and they're approved by Congress. And this power is granted to the president and to the Senate specifically, not the Congress in general, by the Constitution. And it's a very brief statement of that particular power, and it doesn't establish any particular requirements for those appointments. Over time, a historical precedent developed which said that about 70% of our ambassadors, our foreign diplomats in general, including our ambassadors, would come from the professional diplomatic corps. These are people who are trained and highly experienced. They go through a formal training program, including a rigorous exam with the Foreign Service, which is a branch of the U.S. State Department. And then the remaining 30% are chosen by the president from outside of this diplomatic corps. But over time, a third pipeline to an ambassadorship has become increasingly important. And that's, not being in the diplomatic corps, it's not having strong political connections or deep regional expertise. It's having a lot of money. It's making big donations to campaigns, or being able to assemble people to make donations to a president's campaign. And I'm talking about a lot of money. About $2 million seems to be the dollar threshold for being kind of in the running for an ambassador appointment. So the U.S. is fairly unique in this regard. Most countries don't have politically appointed ambassadors. They are trained career professionals. There are some other countries, notably in Western Europe and also Mexico, that have appointees, but at a much lower rate, usually around 10 to 20%. And those appointees typically don't come from private enterprise. They're typically come from other areas of public service, or they are politicians or past politicians themselves. So, we're kind of an outlier in terms of who can become an ambassador in the United States. So you might wonder, why is this the case? Why are there any appointed ambassadors at all? Why don't they all come from the diplomatic corps? And there are arguments for these appointees. For example, many very talented individuals with deep expertise or extensive political connections just work outside of the federal government, but they can provide a lot of value in these ambassador positions. A really good example of that is Samantha Power, who was a Harvard professor of global leadership and kind of an internationally recognized expert on foreign relations. And she was appointed to be an ambassador twice. And, by all accounts, was very successful and impactful in that role. So being an appointee might really make sense depending on a person's background. Second, non-career ambassadors maybe can take a more assertive approach, or be a little more risk-taking, be a little more decisive and rapid in their decision-making than career diplomats, who have to kind of worry about moving up the bureaucratic ladder, because non-career ambassadors are not trying to get the next step up. They're going to go back to their previous jobs when their term is over. And that can, in fact, be an advantage. And the third reason is really personal. If you were the president of the United States, you might prefer to be represented by somebody that you know, somebody that you're close to, somebody who's proved their loyalty, somebody who you are certain shares your political ideology. And you don't necessarily know you're going to get that if your appointed ambassador comes from the State Department, from the trained ranks. You don't really know their background and their beliefs. So there are some good arguments for doing it. But the diplomatic organizations in the United States have stringently argued against having so many appointed ambassadors. And the reason for that is because there is quite a history of kind of embarrassing gaffes, particularly with these appointed ambassadors. They often don't have the knowledge they need of the country that they're going to be effective. They may not understand the language. And in addition to that, they may not understand the U.S. laws and political processes that are really important to being effective in their role, because they don't come from government. They're coming from corporations. So, it's an outstanding question. Should there or shouldn't there be political appointees? I don't know. What do you think? So, irrespective of the first question, whether all ambassadors should be from the diplomatic corps or not, there is a second question, which is, if we are going to have appointed ambassadors, should there be any guardrails on who can be appointed? Right now, there aren't. And, that can lead to problems. So President Trump is just about to take office and no doubt will appoint many good people who will be fine ambassadors. But if you take a look at some of his announced nominees, you can see that there's also going to be a handful of them in there, which maybe aren't a very good choice. And this is where guardrails could potentially be an advantage. For example, Charles Kushner. He is a billionaire real estate developer. He's also Ivanka Trump's father-in-law. So he's got the money, he's got the family connection. Unfortunately, he is also a convicted felon who pled guilty and was sentenced to jail for 18 separate charges, including tax evasion and witness tampering. And in fact, the only reason he's out of jail now and able to be sent to France as an ambassador is because Trump pardoned him in his first term. To the Bahamas, which has gone without a Senate-confirmed ambassador for 14 years, Trump wants to send Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is no doubt a talented football player. He was an NFL star, but he doesn't really have any political or foreign relations experience. On top of that, he wrote a memoir where he claimed to have more than 12 distinct personalities as part of his dissociative identity disorder. And his ex-wife got a restraining order against him because she claimed domestic violence. And, that claim has been repeated by many women who've been associated with him. So those are two of many questionable picks. Donald Trump also wants to nominate the producer of his reality TV show, The Apprentice, as in a key political role. He wants to send Kimberly Guilfoyle, his son's ex-fiance, to Greece as an ambassador. And so the question we need to ask ourselves is this appropriate? These people are definitely not qualified. Their backgrounds may also be very shady. And but there's nothing to prevent him from nominating them. Now, it may seem like I am picking on Donald Trump, but I am not. I'm only speaking about him first because he is the incoming president. So therefore, he's the person who's selecting ambassadors right now. But make no mistake, this is an equal opportunity grift. It knows no party lines. So both Barack Obama and Joe Biden, the other two recent presidents in addition to Trump, they promised not to appoint people without the right background and with no foreign policy experience to these key diplomatic roles. They said that, they made those promises while they were candidates for president. However, as soon as they were elected president, those promises were just rapidly forgotten, and they appointed dozens dozens of unqualified ambassadors who were big donors into ambassadorial positions all over the world. So, it happens in every party. In fact, every single modern president has had numerous dubious appointments to ambassador roles. So it's growing, the frequency of it, but it's a long-standing tradition here in the United States. So the question is really, should presidents be able to reward donors, family members, loyal supporters with these kinds of, kind of plum assignments as ambassadors to glamorous cities around the world? I don't know. What do you think? So putting the question of qualifications aside for a minute, there's still one more key question we really need to ask us, which is, do we need appointed ambassadors at all? So there are a few reasons for this question. Number one, these positions often sit vacant, like for years. I mentioned that there was no ambassador in the Bahamas for 14 years, and that's not because nobody was nominated. When Obama's first choice stepped down after only 2 years, he nominated somebody else. Then Trump came into office, he nominated somebody whose nomination failed, and then he nominated somebody else who didn't get a vote. When Biden came into office, he then nominated someone else who never got a vote during his entire 4-year term. So people are being nominated, but the Senate is just sitting on these nominations and not taking any action. Sometimes they're declining the person, but very often they're just not voting at all. So in this case, where there is no ambassador in place, you might wonder what happens. And the answer kind of is nothing. These embassies continue to function without a Senate-approved ambassador. The lead career diplomat, who would have been the number 2 for the ambassador if they had been in place, simply steps up and runs the embassy themselves. They assume the role of ambassador. So I think there is a very valid question of, why don't we just leave them to it? If there aren't any particular qualifications to be an ambassador, if the president and the Senate don't feel any particular sense of urgency around getting people into these positions, and the embassies are functioning just fine without them, does it matter? Maybe we shouldn't have appointed ambassadors. To be sure, they cost us a lot of money, right? There are 194 positions. I don't know what the exact payroll is, but I imagine it's on the order of 40 million or more for those people, plus the cost of their benefits, the cost to move them overseas, the cost of their residences, the cost of their security, the cost of their travel for vacations. It's probably costing us 120 million at the least to have these appointed ambassadors going out to all of these embassies, in addition to the career diplomats that are already there. So I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you think. I'm not really sure what the right answer is, but click the link below to share your opinions on ambassadors and whether we should have them, whether there are any rules about who they should be. Let's see if there's any consensus among us. So stay tuned to see what happens with President Trump's ambassadorial nominations. Senate hasn't actually taken their seats yet, but when they take power soon, they'll start to vote, and we'll see if they actually vote on any of these.